welcome to the channel. In this video, we are going to check out the Veritas router plane inlay cutter head. Whatever you want to call it. I've had a couple people ask me how to use it, how to set it up, so that's what I'm going to walk you through. I'm going to walk through the setup, walk through it in use, and show you it in an example if you want to go from something like this to this. So, stick with me as we dive in. So here are the components of the inlay cutter head. This is the main post that drives the entire operation. You can see it has a notch just like the blades do, so it goes onto the depth collar of the router plane. Then this is where the blades and the different spacers and everything are going to go. Here are the different spacers, and as you can see, they're color-coded because they are different thicknesses. There are some steel ones, and then there are plastic ones. The steel ones will already be in here. If you bought it used, hopefully they're still there because the steel ones are probably what you're going to be using the most, and then you use the plastic ones to shim it out farther if you need to. So if you bought the shoes and you don't have the instructions, go ahead and screenshot this so you know. Now on that note too, I don't actually use this to try to figure out how thick I need it to be because, especially with inches, that's a struggle. This might be one of the few times I'd say it'd be easier to be in millimeters because look how easy that is compared to 0.120, 0.010, 0.0... Okay, so I'll show you a different way to figure out the thickness of this and how many spacers and stuff you need to use. Here are the blades that do the cutting, obviously, and then there's this stylus piece that I honestly haven't figured out, like, the use for it. I know that when you have the fence, it replaces this screw. So this is the fence for the router plane, which if you're going to be using this inlay cutter head, I highly, highly, highly recommend getting the fence or figuring out a way to have a fence for your router plane. To get everything set up, you first need to take these screws out of the post. So grab your favorite screwdriver, take the screws out. Here are those different metal spacers that we talked about. You can see that they're different thicknesses there. Now, what I recommend is taking one of these screws and putting it through the back side. So the screws were in this way, flip it around and put a screw in this way. So that way, when you're putting the blades and all of these spacers and everything on there, there's already one hole for it to line up at versus trying to manage all of these spacers and get both of these holes to line up. Okay, so from there, you're going to take your blades. Now, when it comes to these blades, you can see that one side is beveled. You want the bevel to face the inside of your inlay. It's the same as a marking knife, so you want it to face towards the inside of whatever you're trying to mark, so that way the outside is a nice crisp line. So throw one of these on there, again, bevel facing towards where the inlay is going to be, which you can tell where the inlay is going to be because look at the base. The inlay is not going to be on the outside because we're putting all of our spacers in here. So, bevel towards the middle. All right, so for this, I tried to bring you guys in a little bit closer to show you how I determine how many spacers and how wide I need to make this setup. Okay, this is where I was saying I don't really use this chart. Like, I'm not going to take this and measure it and figure out all the decimal. I'm not doing all that, okay? So what I do is I put the blade on there, like I said, bevel in. Take the spacers, we'll try these two, okay? Take the other blade, throw it on there. Take the other metal spacer, throw it on top just so you have something to grip onto. And then what I do is I just take it like that and check. And check to see where it's landing. I'm not going to be able to show you guys in the light, but you check to see where it's landing on the sides, and then from there you can determine, do I need a spacer, do I not need a spacer? And for me, it looks like I need a spacer. So this is when I'll look at this chart, because I only need a small one. I only need something little. So that's when I would use these to say, let's try the blue one, okay? Take the blade off, take the outside spacer off. You can leave those two spacers in, then grab one of the blue ones. Throw that on there. Put the blade back on. Again, bevel in. Because if you put this spacer on and find that it's right, you might find yourself just saying, okay, cool, I'm going to lock it all down. So make sure every time you put these blades on, the bevels are going in. So see how that one's up? This one needs to go the opposite way. okay? Throw that on there. Throw the other spacer on top just so you have something to grab onto. It's also good so that when you do lock it down, the screws aren't directly on the blade. Then you put it back up against your piece. That is too much. All right, so let me take this back apart. Take this spacer out. What's this next small one? Red, orange. So put the blue one back. Throw that on there. Blade again, bevel in. Spacer on top. That looks good to me. Again, I won't be able to show you, but you want it to be just inside the inlay, the sides of the inlay. If it goes too far out, your inlay is going to be too wide. If it goes too far in, you're going to have a lot of cleanup to do, but you want it to just be inside so you can give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. If it's just outside, you're going to see a gap, and there's no fixing that unless you get a bigger inlay piece, that's a struggle. So make sure it's just on the inside of the edges. But again, this looks good to me. So since I already have this set up, I know the bevels are in. You can see the bevel there, that's in. The other bevel is in. I have my spacer on the outside. I can go ahead and put the screw in. And what I found is sometimes you just have to wiggle it until it gets all the way to the side and then tighten it down. Oh, I didn't wiggle far enough. The other thing I want you to think about is if you are setting it just inside, and I literally mean just barely inside the edge of the inlay piece, when you tighten this all down, it's going to go slightly farther in because you're compressing everything. So you can account for that as well, but I mean, we're talking such a minimal amount that just experiment with it. You guys will figure it out. Again, it's better to have to make the inlay wider than trying to figure out how to make it smaller because you can't. Again, you'd have to go with a different inlay piece. All right, so then I'm going to take this side out and put it on the proper side. I tightened. What I'm going to recommend, don't tighten this one down all the way because it made that screw tougher to take out. I forgot about that part, so let me loosen this slightly. There we go. Much easier. All right, now that both are on the same side, you can tighten it down. You don't need to go super snug. But there you go. And you can always double check yourself if you want to right now to make sure that this is going to be appropriate, that it's just to the inside. And again, I won't be able to show you in video, but it is. So we have our plane, and the first thing that you want to do is take the blade out if you have a blade in there. And then just store it wherever you store them. All right, so now that that's out of there, I like to work on the fence next. Now, I don't use the fence often when it comes to the router plane, so every single time I go to set it up, I have to remember how it works. So I'm doing this part of the video for myself. The screw is normally in the end of here, but as you can see, that wonderful stylus they gave us, I put in the end of here. Again, I still don't know what it's used for, so let me know if you know. Then that screw goes in the back of here, where it creates that little lip, and then that goes right in there. So then you can see how the fence goes underneath the plane. Next is putting the inlay cutter head into the plane, which you install it the same exact way you do the blades. Now, I have seen some people flip it around and use it on the other side of the plane, like through the back of it, and it actually shows that on their box that you can put it on the back of the plane. But when you look at all of the instructions, that's in the front of the plane. Front of the plane, front of the plane. That's the regular blade. But, so you have the option to do either, depending on whatever you're working on, what your comfort level is with it. So try different things. If you are new at this and you've never used this before, I recommend putting it in the front so you have this front as a reference. Because if you're going this way, there's a tendency to tip the plane because there is no reference face back here. So again, if you're new, use this side, put the blade in like normal. When you are putting the blade in, I know with the other blades, I have a tendency to push on the bottom to put the blade into place. Don't do that with these because there are sharp edges right there, just so you know. All right, this is set up. Now, how do we determine how far away to put this? Let me show you that. One way you can do this is you can take one of these blades and measure to the side of the fence and then compare that to your workpiece and adjust your fence accordingly. I don't like that. I feel the more measurements we take, the higher chance we have of making an error. But that could just be my preference, and I make a lot of errors, so who knows. But that's one way. Let me show you the way that I do it. All right, so what I like to do first is mark how far away from the edge I want my inlay to be. Now, this is softwood, so I probably shouldn't put it this close, but we're going to go for it. So what you can do then is take your plane and drop it down on top, and you can see where the blades are going to hit. So undo your fence, slide it over the other way, this way, until the blade lines up with the line. Lock it down. And then double check yourself, look at it from different angles, whatever you want to do, but make sure that is lined up where you need it to go. Now, if you are new at this, I want to caution you to not immediately try this for the first time on your workpiece. Go to a scrap piece of wood and try this out first because it's a new tool. It's something different. I know you're probably familiar with the router plane, but this is a tool in and of itself, and it needs to be treated differently than just the router blades, okay? So first and foremost, don't dive right into your project. Test this out first. That's also good so you can test out the inlays. I mean, if you're working on some sort of exotic wood, definitely practice on something else first. What I'm using right now is poplar, so like I said, from the edge here, it's probably going to tear out, but we'll be all right. We're going to try it. Okay, so what you do now, this is a very weird camera angle too, by the way, because I'm actually behind the camera. So I'm going to try to do this so you guys can see it actually cutting. So loosen the blade lock and adjust your depth until you can feel it. Okay, I can feel it cutting, so I'm going to lock it down. Now, a good thing to do is to actually take this and go slightly backwards, like that, and then forwards. And you can check your score marks. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it is barely digging in, which is okay. I'm going to loosen the depth collar, the collar lock slightly down, lock it again. Score my piece. Can you guys see that line? So it's scoring. I'm going to go ahead and have it go deeper here. When you get to the ends, make sure you're not tilting because it would be very tough. The reason I'm doing light passes is because if you already have this established, it is very tough to try to reestablish a different line. So if you get to the end and it curves, which I kind of did a little bit out of camera, slightly right there. But if it gets pretty drastic, it's tough to fix, which you guys might notice that when you're using like a marking knife or marking gauge or something like that, these are the same concept. So you want to do light passes. When you get more comfortable with it, you might learn when you can go on a heavier pass or not, but I'm weird. I like doing light passes because I'm not in production and I'm not usually ever in a rush. Loosen advance slightly. You'll be able to feel it too, loosen up, whenever it has reached its max cutting depth. That part is the same as the normal router plane. So now that I have this scored pretty well, you can choose to keep going depending on how deep your inlay needs to be. Actually, because this is softwood, I am going to keep going. So let me adjust the depth. There you go. And just keep working it back and forth until you think that it's going to be good. Again, practice on something else. So then I'm going to grab a normal router plane blade and clean this out. For this part of the video, I kind of lost track and just started enjoying using the tool, so I pretty much stopped talking. But what you're going to do is you're going to rotate between the inlay cutter head and your router plane blade. That's one of the reasons I recommend having, the large router plane and then the medium or the small one to kind of supplement that. But you don't need to. You can take the inlay cutter head out, put the router plane blade in there, clear out what you need, swap them back out, and so on and so forth until you get to the desired depth. If you are having very thin inlays, This is going to be a quick process. If you're doing a thick inlay, which you don't need to, that's something to keep in mind. You just need enough there for the glue to hold on to, which isn't a lot. But if you're going with a very thick inlay, for whatever reason, you're going to be swapping back and forth multiple times. So there you go. Go ahead and glue your inlay in. I'm just using some thin CA glue here because this is not a project piece. This is just something I was using for the video. Once it's glued in and it's dry, go ahead and plane down the surface or sand the surface, whatever your preference is. Add some finish and you're good to go. All right, so I got lucky on that one. It doesn't always work out that way, that I get the spacing and everything right. Eventually, you're going to learn it and almost have it down pat. But what you can always do is plane down the sides of your inlay, sand down the sides of your inlay if it's slightly off to get it to be a good fit. The other thing you can do is add spacers in here. Now, if you are very far off, if you add a spacer in between these two blades, this blade is now going to be closer to your fence. So if you're that far off, keep that in mind. If you're only slightly off, say for example, you need to add like one of these little plastic ones in there, I wouldn't worry about it too much unless your project needs that level of precision. So if you do need to make adjustments, just think about that. Think about how the spacing is going to change in relation to the fence. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, any comments, anything like that, let us know. Again, be patient with yourself. Take the time to learn the tool, and always remember it's basically like a marking gauge, so don't get too aggressive with it right away. When it comes to router planes, you're really not supposed to be aggressive with them anyways. I've heard a few people talk about they have the Veritas router plane slip, but they also told me they're trying to hog material. It's not made to do that, so just keep that in mind. If you have this tool and like it, or there's any other pointers that you have for people, feel free to let us know down below. I hope you guys enjoyed, and have a good day.